Well, after such a great introduction, I can't wait to hear the speaker myself. Sometimes these accolades can backfire. Recently, New York Magazine voted me as one of the 100 smartest people in New York. And I thought, wow, what an honor. But in all fairness, I have to admit that Madonna also made the same list. And next year, they tell me that Lady Gaga is going to push me off the list entirely. So, what can I say? Now today, I'm going to talk about the future, your future. Now, predicting the future is very difficult. Let me quote from that great philosopher of the Western world, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra once said, quote, "Prediction is awfully hard to do, especially if it's about the future." Well, I'm a physicist. We can predict the future of the universe billions of years into the future. So let me quote now from that other great philosopher of the Western world, Woody Allen. Woody Allen once said, quote, "Eternity is an awful long time, especially toward the end." Well, you may say to yourself, what does a physicist do anyway? Well, we invented the laser. We invented the transistor. And most of the world's economy depends on lasers and transistors. We helped to assemble the first computer and the internet. We wrote the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web was written by a physicist to keep track of subatomic particles. And by the way, we also invented television. We invented radio, radar. Everything you see in a doctor's office, the MRI machine, was invented by a physicist. We created the space program. We created the GPS system. And we physicists love to make predictions. When we helped to assemble the internet, one physicist predicted that the internet would become a forum of high culture, high art, and high society. Well, today we know that 5% of the internet is pornography. Nobody here, of course. But that's because teenage boys log on to the internet. Just wait until the grandmas and grandpas log on to the internet. Then 50% of the internet will be pornography. So, before I begin, let me tell you a cautionary story. Sometimes we physicists can know too much. Over 200 years ago, we had the Great French Revolution. And one day there were three gentlemen about to have their heads chopped off at the guillotine. There was a priest, a lawyer, and a theoretical physicist, just like me, about to have our heads chopped off. Well, they put the priest's head on the chopping block, and they asked him, "Do you have any last words before we chop your head off?" And the priest said, "Yes." He said, "Yes." He said, God from above shall certainly set me free." Well, all eyes were on the blade. They raised the guillotine blade. The blade came down, swish, and stopped right before it hit the neck of the priest. Well, the mob had never seen this before. The mob went crazy. The mob had said, "Let him go, because today God has spoken." And now, let's see about the lawyer. Yes, the lawyer. They put the lawyer's head on the chopping block, and they asked him, "Do you have any last words?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Maybe the spirit of justice. Yes, justice shall set me free." All eyes were on the blade. They raised the blade. The blade came down and swish, and stopped right before it hit the neck of the lawyer. Well, this time the mob went crazy. Dancing in the streets of Paris, people were shouting, "God has spoken. Justice has spoken today." And now let's see about the physicist. Yes, they put the physicist's head on the chopping block. They asked him, "Do you have any last words?" And he said, yeah, I got some house words. And he said, I don't know too much about God, and I know even less about the law, but I do know one thing. If you look up, you'll see that the rope is stuck on the pulley. And then he said, if you remove the rope, the blade should come down real good. Big mistake. Huge, big mistake. Well, the rope came down, the blade came down, and the poor physicist's head came down. And the moral of the story is, sometimes we physicists have to know when to keep our mouths shut. Nonetheless, today, let me give you a guided tour of the future. The next 20 years. I've had the privilege of interviewing over 300 of the world's top scientists for radio, television. In fact, you can listen to me every week. Every weekend, I'm on the Sirius XM satellite, channel 166, and you can listen to 3 hours of interviews with Nobel Prize winners, leaders in the scientific community, every weekend on Sirius XM. But let's talk about the next 20 years. Well, first of all, my other book, Physics of the Impossible, talks about the next 500 years, when we have starships, we have teleportation, and we have telepathy. Teleportation, think about that. You take Captain Kirk and you teleport him across the room, and then you say to yourself, who is this imposter over here who claims to be Captain Kirk, who sells Priceline just like Captain Kirk? Who is this person? Well, just remember that teleportation, time travel, maybe, just maybe, they are within the laws of physics. So let's now talk about the future. Now, some of you may say to yourself, well, you guys can't predict the future. You guys can't even predict the past. Nobody predicted the crash of 2008. Well, that's not quite true. Let's talk about the crash of 2008 and who predicted it. First of all, where does wealth come from anyway? After everything is said and done, wealth comes from science and technology. But you see, science comes in waves. One invention creates a cascade of secondary invention. That wave creates wealth, incredible wealth. But wealth has to go someplace. Wealth is restless. It creates often a bubble, a huge bubble. And when the bubble pops, you get a depression. So let's now have a history lesson, and then let's go into the future. So first, let's go into the past. The year is now 1800. We physicists worked out the laws of thermodynamics. We could calculate how much energy you get from a lump of coal. From this, we unleashed the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden we had locomotives, we had factories generating wealth. Wealth that an agrarian society had never seen before. Fantastic wealth, but wealth is restless. The wealth generated by the steam revolution had to go somewhere. Where did it go? Into the London Stock Exchange, creating a huge bubble in railroad stocks. It was unsustainable. The bubble crashed in 1850. A huge crash of capitalism. The crash was so severe, it even created a philosophy called Marxism. Now, we physicists are also restless. We unleash the next wave of innovation, and that is electricity, the internal combustion engine. This wealth created a huge bubble on the American Stock Exchange, wealth that we had never seen before, wealth in the form of electricity and the gasoline-powered engine. It crashed in 2009. 80 years later, on the dot, we physicists unleashed the third wave. High technology, lasers, computers, GPS, the space program. This created enormous wealth. Wealth that created a bubble. It was unsustainable. In America, the bubble went into real estate, and it collapsed in 2008. But the bubble also was created in Europe, and that bubble was created sustaining the Mediterranean lifestyle. Well, the Mediterranean lifestyle is not sustainable, and it is crashing even as we speak, perhaps this year. So here's the question for today. This is the question for the ages, for the next 80 years. What is the fourth wave? The first wave was steam power, industrializing the world for the first time, leading to the crash of 1850. The second wave was electricity, creating vast wealth for Thomas Edison and other great inventors. It created the wealth of 1929, and it crashed, creating the Great Depression. The third great wave was even bigger in high technology, lasers, transistors. It crashed in 2008. What is the fourth wave? That is today's talk. We think it'll be a combination of three things: biotech, nanotech, artificial intelligence. So let's now talk about the future, your future. First of all, this is Moore's Law. It simply says that computer power doubles every 18 months. But the wealth and power of nations depends upon this curve. Think about it. Computer power doubles every 18 months. Today, if you get a birthday card in the mail and you open it up, there's a chip in that card that sings "Happy Birthday to you." Birthday cards sing to you these days because there's a chip in that card. That chip has more computer power than all the Allied forces of 1945. Hitler, Stalin, Roosevelt would have killed to get that chip. And what do you do with it? You throw it away in the garbage. If Hitler had that chip in 1940, we might all be speaking German here today rather than English. And now look at 1969. In 1969, we put 2 men on the moon. But you ever seen pictures of mission control? Clunky 64K processors at mission control? You realize that your cell phone has more computer power than all of NASA in 1969? We were sending humans into outer space backed up by a cell phone. You're not going to get me in one of those tin cans. I'm not going to go into outer space knowing that I'm backed up by a cell phone. But that's what we did according to this chart. And now look at 2020. You now know the future. The future is that chips will cost about a penny in 2020. That's the cost of paper, scrap paper. Bubblegum wrappers cost about a penny, which means that the computer will disappear. Disappear. It'll be everywhere and nowhere, like electricity. When you walk into a room today, what's the first thing you do when you walk into a room? You look for the light switch. You assume that electricity is in the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Electricity is everywhere and nowhere. And the word electricity has pretty much disappeared from the English language. Nobody says the word electricity anymore. And where does electricity come from? Who knows where electricity comes from? It's the cloud someplace. Well, you now know the future of the computer. The future of the computer is to disappear, to be everywhere and nowhere. The word computer will disappear from the English language. No one will say computer anymore. And where will computer power come from? You know, the cloud someplace. Who knows where computer power comes from? So let's talk about the world, your world, when the internet is everywhere and nowhere, including your glasses. Google, of course, is test marketing glasses this year, available for sale. These glasses, however, recognize people's faces. And when you see somebody, it will print out the biography next to their name, so you'll always know who you're talking to. And if they speak Chinese to you, it'll translate from English to Chinese, so you'll always be able to talk to anybody. This is very useful. Let's say you're looking for a job, and you're at a cocktail party, but you don't know who the heavy hitters are. In the future, you will know exactly who to suck up to at any cocktail party. Or let's say you bump into somebody and you say, I know this person. Jim, John, Jake, I know this person. What is his name? Your glasses will say, it's Jim, stupid. I remind you once a month. Can't you remember these people's names? And of course, people will not want to look like a refugee from Star Trek. They will want to be fashionable. Children are the driving force behind much of this technology. Some of you may say to yourself, I'm too old, I can't learn all this stuff. Talk to your grandkids. Your grandkids will love it. Because there are three ways to do it. You can shoot the information to your retina, you can use the glasses as a screen, or you can have an eyepiece. Sooner or later, fashion models will wear these things. It'll be fashionable to be wired up anywhere, anytime, and if you want to be unwired, you just hit the off button. So we will have information if you want it. This is the future of your entertainment center, the future of your home office. Now, there's a problem. The problem is, let's say you don't wear glasses. Let's say you don't like glasses. Then, what are you going to do? Then you will blink and go online. And who are the first people to buy internet contact lenses? College students taking final examinations. Nobody here, of course. But hey, you're taking a final exam, you blink, and there's all the answers. The periodic chart. You don't have to memorize all those silly crystals and all those silly formulas anymore. You just blink. Who's the second person to buy internet contact lenses? President Barack Obama. So he doesn't have to have these two damn teleprompters. Ever see these politicians make speeches looking at the teleprompter? Actors, actresses will love it because they simply blink. And who's the third person who will buy these internet contact lenses? Vice President Joe Biden, so he will always be on message and never say anything goofy on national television. Who also buy these internet contact lenses? Tourists. Ever been in Rome or some capital and you can't bargain with the merchants? They don't understand English, you don't understand Serbo-Croatian, and you can't bargain with them. In the future, you'll be able to communicate, have a conversation, because you'll see subtitles. Google is already working out the dynamic between Mandarin and English. It's at the level of a UN translator. That's the quality of translation between English and Mandarin Chinese, currently available already. So you'll see that you will be able to negotiate with anybody. If you're a tourist walking the streets of Rome, you'll be able to resurrect the Roman Empire right in your contact lens. You will live in the Matrix. This is the Matrix. You'll be able to conjure up any world that you can think of right inside your contact lens. This is called augmented reality, and it's, quote, the next big thing. When the computer disappears, and it's everywhere and nowhere. Now, augmented reality, you've seen it before in a Hollywood movie. There's a Hollywood movie which first introduced augmented reality to the people of the world. What was that movie?
Terminator.
Here is the former governor of California. In a very bad mood. It is the Terminator. You see, the Terminator robot sees a biography of everything it looks at. You will always know where you are. You'll never get lost. You'll be able to talk to anybody in their home language. If you don't remember the periodic chart of elements, boom, you'll see the periodic chart just by blinking. And you may say to yourself, is this science fiction? And the answer is no. It already exists. The military has an operational version of this already. It's called Land Warrior. It is an eyepiece. An eyepiece that fits on your helmet. You flick it right over your eye, and bingo, you are online. I flew down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I put this on for the TV camera for the Science Channel. And we filmed using this device. So the military already has the internet of the battlefield. When I looked into this eyepiece, I saw a map of friendly forces, artillery, armor, aircraft, all of it right there in my eyepiece. This already exists. Now we're trying to put it in your contact lens, so you simply blink and you wake up in the Matrix. So what this is causing is the digitalization of capitalism itself. Take a look at music. Music was the first industry to be digitalized. It meant that you can download movies almost for free, anytime, anywhere. This has changed the music industry. Prices went down. You can now download any music that you want. You can even hum a few bars. If you only know da 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 da, but you don't know where that came from, you can then look up the piece just humming a few bars. It's an incredible convenience. But the music industry said, bah, humbug. People will always buy music the old-fashioned way, they said. Wrong. You know who controls the music industry today? I was rather surprised. Talk to any music executive, and they will tell you that Apple Computers controls the music industry through iPod, through iTunes. That's what happens if you ignore the future. My attitude is get on the wagon. Be part of the future. Don't let the future run over you. The next industry to be digitalized is publishing, media, movies. You can watch any movie you want anytime now on your cable box. Eventually, you'll simply talk to your contact lens and download any movie and live in that movie. And so this is the future. It'll be convenient, cheap. You won't have to go to the Blockbuster video on the neighborhood block. You won't have to look up a music library to find out the tune you want. You'll simply ask for it and get it. Movies, magazines, newspapers have been digitalized. The future is medicine, education, and transportation. In the future, they too will be digitalized. So don't fight it. Go with the flow. Be ahead of the curve. So let's talk about this. First of all, money will be digitalized. When you want to buy something today and you forgot to put cash in your wallet, or you lost your credit card, you can't buy anything. In the future, it'll be your cell phone. In Japan and in Europe, you can already buy things by pointing and clicking. So cash, your credit card, will eventually become obsolete because you'll simply point and click, point and click. Eventually, it'll be in your contact lens. You'll simply look at something, blink, and you've just bought yourself some expensive piece of jewelry. Oops, I blinked too much. This is the cell phone of the future. Today, if you are typing on your cell phone and you have fat fingers, forget it. There's no way you can text if you have fat fingers. However, in the future, we physicists have made intelligent paper. Intelligent paper is made out of plastic. And they're little diodes, each diode connected to a transistor, and you can scroll it out like paper. You can scroll on a TV screen or a keyboard as big as you want from your cell phone, and then just fold it up. In fact, we can make so much of this stuff that this is the future of wallpaper. Wallpaper will become intelligent. Today, if your wallpaper is old, ratty, stained, discolored, what do? You suffer, that's what you do. Replace wallpaper? That's a big job. In the future, you simply talk to your wallpaper and bargain and say, look, please change. Okay? And this is going to revolutionize medicine. Medicine is the next big industry to be digitalized. Let's say it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you feel something. Is it the pizza you had last night or maybe a heart attack? It could be serious. What are you going to do? You will go to the wall and say to the wall, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, I want to see a doctor right now." Boom! RoboDoc appears. RoboDoc is pioneered by IBM. It is artificially intelligent. It accesses the internet, for God's sake, looking at all the medical journals, and speaks common English to you, not gobbledygook, and tells you if it was pizza you had last night, or whether you should be going to the hospital. This is going to reduce the cost of medical care. So many times, poor people do not go to a doctor because a doctor's visit costs too much. And when they do go to the doctor, it's for an emergency, racking up huge bills. In the future, you just talk to RoboDoc in the wall. Also, let's say you're in a car accident, and you got to talk to a lawyer real fast. Boom, robo-lawyer. It appears in your wall, okay? So, legal advice, common legal advice, common medical advice, prices will drop. Now, of course, we will still have doctors, we will still have lawyers. You have to have specialized people to take care of these things. But for everyday things, we're going to rely more and more on this. Or for that matter, robo-professor. If you skip a class one day, not my course, of course, but if you skip class one day, you'll be able to, boom, conjure up robo-professor. And so these are called expert systems. Expert systems is the first major artificially intelligent program to enter into the marketplace. True robots have been a bust. I'll talk about true robots later. The brain turned out to be much more complicated than we thought. Sorry about that. Even your brain's much more complicated than we thought. Just kidding. However, we now realize that expert advice can be computerized. The expert advice of a doctor, lawyer, that can be computerized. And this is your living room of the future. You will relax surrounded by intelligent wallpaper and 360-degree screens. In a soccer game or football game, you will be right on the 50-yard line, sitting in the middle of the 50-yard line, being surrounded by all the players. And this is also the future of your love life. Let's say you're a college student, and it's Friday night, and you have no date. Fess up, we all know what you do. You get stone drunk. However, in the future, if it's Friday night, you have no date, you go to the wallpaper and say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's available tonight?" Boom! The wall knows the kind of people you like, talks to all the other wall screens where people are staring blankly saying, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's available?" Sets you up with a date. And then you'll go to a nice movie or whatever, come home, and then you'll say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, my date and I want to see an old-fashioned movie like Casablanca, except remove Humphrey Bogart's face and put my face instead." You will be the hero of every action movie. Forget Schwarzenegger, forget Humphrey Bogart, right? This means that as chips are put into objects, they become cheaper, more powerful, more efficient. Even Christmas will be changed. Chips are being placed in toys, and toys are going to become more intelligent. This is creating a problem for the English language. We have a contradiction in terms called smart Barbie dolls. Another contradiction in terms is Microsoft Works. That's also a contradiction in terms. And this is the future of television. We all curl up on that TV screen at night, but it's flat. It's been flat for 50 years. But we physicists finally figured out how to make 3D television without glasses. It's called antiquated technology. The secret is the screen. The screen consists of thousands of vertical lines, invisible vertical lines. Each vertical line is a prism. It cuts the image in half. One half goes to the left eye, one half goes to the right eye, and bingo, 3D without glasses. This is going to revolutionize your living room in the coming years. It's already commercially available for video games. Small video screens, you can already buy it. We're now talking about the big flat screen TV. I tell you, the future will be like the Matrix. And what will your office look like in the future? This is your office of the future. Notice that there's no PC there anymore. Why should there be a PC? These are called scrap computers. They only cost a few pennies, because chips only cost a few pennies. You scribble on them, and then throw them away. But when you go from room to room, the scribble follows you in the cloud. So when you go from room to room, room to house, house to work, all your files follow you in the cloud seamlessly. Everything you do is recorded, but the PC has disappeared because these things all talk to each other, and as you move from room to room, they follow you. These are penny disposable computers. And this is your cubicle of the future. It'll be three-dimensional, wraparound, color, flexible. It'll be so gorgeous, you'll never get any work done in the future. And this is the future of your car. How will you drive to work? Well, you won't. Driving is going to be digitalized. Just like music was digitalized, just like movies are being digitalized now, the car is going to be digitalized very soon. I drove this car for BBC television. BBC flew me down to North Carolina, and they put me in this driverless car, which uses GPS and radar in the fenders. So there I was driving this car. And then the BBC cameraman said, "Let go of the steering wheel." And I said, "What? You nuts? I'm not going to let go of the steering wheel. You crazy?" And the BBC cameraman said, "Trust me. Let go of the steering wheel." So I closed my eyes and I let go of the steering wheel, and the car drove itself. Let's do a science experiment. After today's lecture, get in your car and do this. Try driving your car like this. That's how you will drive your car in the future. 8 years. 8 years from now, says Google, the first commercially available digital cars will be on the road. Some states of the Union have already legalized it. It is already now legal in certain states to drive a driverless car. Now, the interstate is probably going to be the first place where it's going to be used. The average suburbanite will probably not drive this car so much, but interstate truckers that have to drive for many, many hours, 80 hours to go from San Francisco to New York City, 80 hours, they're going to use this thing first. Eventually, we'll just get used to it, and eventually suburbanites will simply push a button, and it's already now proven to be safer than humans. In test after test, humans fall asleep, humans get lazy, they get distracted, humans are a mess. So these computers can eliminate all that. So we're talking about the seamless transfer of information from your contact lens to your car, to your home, seamlessly, without having to reboot things and having different operating systems. It'll be seamless in the future. Now, everyone, of course, asks the question, what about flying cars? When are we going to fly our car? Well, I got news for you. We already have flying cars. Here are some of them. Many designs have been tested. The problem is they cost too much. The fuel mileage is outrageously expensive. We have to bring down the cost of fuel because we already have flying cars. They're just toys for millionaires. Now, it turns out that technology goes through stages. So let's go through the stages. Like paper. Paper went through the stage of papyrus, where I have 100 scribes and 1 papyrus scroll. You got that? 100 people, 1 scroll. That lasted for thousands of years. Then we went to stage 2, where we had the personal book. 1 human, 1 book. Now we have the personal library, where we have 1 human, 100 books. Then we have stage 4, where paper is infinitely abundant and we use it as a fashion statement. This is the future of the computer. Computer, electricity, all follow these basic steps. Electricity went from a factory motor, 100 workers with one factory motor, to the personal light bulb. And today at Christmas, how many light bulbs do you have? And in the future, today, electricity is a fashion statement. That's the evolution of computers. When computers were first introduced, you had 100 scientists guarding one mainframe computer. Then Bill Gates and Steve Jobs popularized the personal computer. And now, the personal computer will disappear. You will access thousands of computers just by talking to the cloud. And computer power, if you see it at all, will be a fashion statement. Transportation went through the same process. So all mass technologies goes to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Computers are now in stage 3. Eventually they will hit stage 4. They will disappear. Just the way running water, electricity, and other mass technologies have done. This is the future of how you will buy things in the future. How will you buy things? Today, if you go to a dress store and you see the perfect dress, right color, right shape, right designer, everything's perfect except wrong size. What happens today? Nothing. No sale. In the future, you whip out your credit card. Your credit card has your 3D measurements. You email it to the cloud. The cloud punches out the perfect dress and sends you the bill later. Everything will fit in the future. Not just dresses, but Christmas presents will fit. These are 3D printers. They already exist. We can already print machine parts. Delicate machine parts can now be printed in 3 dimensions using plastic. We're now experimenting with liquid metals using this technology. This is how we will celebrate Christmas in the future. We will email the blueprints of Christmas presents, and then you will print it on your 3D printer, okay? So we will celebrate Christmas with 3D printers. And by the way, we can also print organs of the body. This is still experimental, but we can already print heart tissue using 3D printers. So what does this mean? This means we're headed for something called perfect capitalism. Capitalism is based on supply and demand. But supply and demand are imperfect in the future. You will have perfect knowledge of what things really cost. When you walk into a grocery store of the future, your contact lens will scan all the products and tell you who has the cheapest product, the best product. And by the way, these contact lenses will communicate with other contact lenses. Let's say I have a husband and wife, and let's say the husband does the grocery shopping and gets everything wrong, okay? The next time the husband goes out and buys everything wrong, the image will be sent to the wife at home, and the wife will say, no, not that orange. That orange is rotten. No, not the tomato, okay? So husband and wife will be able to communicate to give you the best tomatoes. And of course, if you're a business, how will you thrive if the consumer knows everything about your product? You can't cheat anymore. You can't lie about a product because the consumer in his contact lens knows everything about your product. You will have to do data mining, targeted marketing, positioning, branding in order to survive under this system. And of course, common courtesy is perhaps the most important product that a merchant can sell. And then, now, the big question. We talked about the digitalization of music. We talked about publishing, movies. We talked about transportation. Now the big one, medicine. Medicine is now being slowly digitalized. First of all, how small can you make a chip? We can make a chip so small that you can put it inside an aspirin pill, along with a TV camera and a magnet. You swallow it, you guide it with the magnet, and it takes beautiful TV pictures of your stomach and your intestines. Because we all know what middle-aged men fear the most. Middle-aged men fear the C word, colonoscopy. But this gives new meaning for the expression, Intel inside. Yes, Intel will always be inside. And nanotechnology that we talked about, we can now create molecules that target individual cancer cells. This is big, really big. At NIH in Washington, we're already now doing human trials of nanoparticles that kill individual cancer cells. No chemotherapy. These people are beyond chemotherapy. They're in a fatal stage. They're going to die. They're now being experimented with the nanoparticles, and the results are incredible. We're talking about total remission of the tumors using nanoparticles. In the next slide, we will talk about the invention that will render the word tumor obsolete from the English language. The next invention is huge. It will banish tumors. Watch carefully. The next invention is your toilet. Your toilet will have a chip in it. That chip is a DNA chip. It picks up fragments of cancer cells, enzymes, and proteins. When you have a cancer tumor in your breast, it's too late. By the time you feel it, it's too late. You got 10 billion cancer cells growing in your breast. Cancer surgery is required immediately. In the future, you will go to your toilet, and your toilet will say, "You have breast cancer. Do something. You have 15 years." The word tumor could disappear from the English language. Think about that. Your toilet, your bathroom mirror will detect fragments of cancer cells, proteins, molecules emitted by cancers that can be detected. And what about going to the doctor's office? You have this huge, gigantic MRI machine, right? But why does it have to be so big? One of my colleagues that actually I worked for years ago won the Nobel Prize in Physics for laying the foundation of the MRI machine. Won the Nobel Prize for this. Why does the MRI machine have to be so big? Because the magnet has to be uniform. That's why. That's why you need a big magnet. That's why they have to be big. But we can use computer power to compensate for a weak magnetic field. On the right is the world's smallest MRI machine. It is the size of a briefcase, and it takes pictures of the inside of your body. So Scientific American interviewed these German scientists, these German physicists, and asked them, how small can you make an MRI machine according to the laws of physics? And the answer is this big. This is the tricorder of Star Trek. You simply wave it over a person's body, and it takes pictures of their insides. This is coming. MRI machines this big. You will have more computer power in your medicine cabinet than a modern university hospital. And this is DNA. I had my DNA scanned. I took some of my blood, gave it to BBC television. They shipped it out to Vanderbilt University and Cambridge, and they gave me back a CD-ROM with most of my genes on it. You will have that as well. And how much will it cost? Well, the first person to have his gene sequenced, James Watson, it cost $3 billion to sequence the first human being. Today, as of today, if you were to commercially get your gene sequenced, every single gene in your body, it would cost $1,000. In the future, it'll cost $100. And BBC told me where my ancestors came from 20,000 years ago. We can now trace your genetic lineage 20,000 years into the past. And what are we going to do with this in terms of health? We're going to grow human organs of the body as they wear out. This is an ear. It's made out of plastic. It's biodegradable. You take cells from your ear, put it in this thing, it grows, creates a perfect ear, and then the plastic dissolves because it's biodegradable. This is bone on the left, cartilage, ears, noses on the right. We can now grow entire bladders. We can grow skin, cartilage, noses, ears, blood vessels. The first bladder was grown a few years ago. The first complete windpipe for a child was also grown just a few months ago. We're talking about the fact that the words organ failure will eventually disappear from the English language. The next major organ to be grown is the liver. So for all you alcoholics in the audience, take heart. Just pray that we create the first liver before your liver wears out because you drink too much. But yes, we will grow livers. That's the next major target for tissue engineering. And what about the next organ of the body? The brain. Well, on an MRI scan, on the left is the brain when it tells the truth. Nothing much happens when you tell the truth. But if you tell a lie, yes, if you tell a lie, first you have to know the truth. Then you have to create the lie. Then you have to calculate the consistency of that lie with all the other lies you've been telling all these years. That's a lot of brain power. Your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. So there's your brain on the right telling a lie. And what else can you do with this? We can now connect a paralyzed person to a machine that allows them to move objects, move arms and legs. This person is paralyzed. He had a stroke. He is a vegetable. He lives all his life paralyzed. Complete brain living in a paralyzed body. At Brown University, they put a chip in his brain, hooked him up to a computer, and he can now surf the web. He can type email. He can answer email. He can move his wheelchair. He can use a toaster. He can do anything you can do on a computer. The next step is to connect them to a working body. So far, the military has hooked up the brain to a mechanical arm. These mechanical arms can now give you a high five, they can give you a fist bump, and they can shake your hand without crushing your hand. That's today. And my colleague, Stephen Hawking, has now lost complete control over his vocal cords. He cannot speak or move his fingers anymore. So what did we do? We hooked him up to an EEG sensor on his glass. Look at his right glass. You see his right glass? There's a little instrument on his right glass that's connected to a computer. And he can now type by thinking about it. And so this is the future, not 10 years, maybe 20 years in the future. In a 20-year time frame, we just walk into a room and just mentally control things in the room, including other robots. This is Japan, where we have, by pure thought, we can control another robot. Now, I also mentioned that education is the next industry to be digitalized. You will probably see this in your classroom very soon. We all know that when you were in elementary school and you didn't feel like going to school that day, you asked your mother for an excuse. Remember? I used to ask my mother all the time for an excuse. Well, those days are gone. In the future, you will have a surrogate. The surrogate is your substitute. It will go to class for you. Your teacher will see your image in the surrogate, and you will see her image in your surrogate at home. No more playing hooky. Sorry about that, folks. Okay? You will have perfect attendance, even if you're sick in bed, because the classroom is also being digitalized. We also have master professors giving lectures on the internet. But there's a problem. The problem with e-classroom instruction is the dropout rate. About 90% of the students who sign up for e-classes drop out in the first week. Why is that? Because you have to have personal encouragement, mentoring, social pressure, peer pressure. You have to create that social network that keeps you motivated. That you cannot do with e-instruction or e-classrooms. The bottom line is you have to have both. And let me just say a few things about robots. Will we have true robots in the future? Well, I had a chance to interact with Asimov, Asimo is the world's most advanced robot. He can walk, climb up stairs, he can dance. He dances much better than me. I've been on many programs with him and he dances much better than I do. He also can carry on a conversation, they say. So I interviewed for BBC television the creator of Asimo. And I asked the creator, if your robot in Japan is the world's smartest robot, how smart is he anyway? And the inventor was very honest. On television, he said, Asimo, our creation, is as intelligent as a cockroach, a retarded cockroach, a lobotomized, stupid, retarded cockroach. It is a tape recorder. Everything is pre-programmed. It's dance moves, it's walking patterns. It's it's like a tape recorder, a very advanced tape recorder. Now that doesn't mean that one day we won't have true robots. It just means that right now they have the intelligence of a fly. So why is Japan spending millions of dollars building robots? You've probably seen specials on Japanese robots. 30% of all robots are built in Japan. Why? Because these are robot nurses of the future. Japan is aging faster than any industrialized nation. And they need nurses to take care of the aged, and that's why they're investing so heavily in robots. They are actually robot nurses. And so let me just say a few things about the job market, and then I'm going to go into the video. In the video, we're going to go 50 years into the future and visit a doctor's office. What will it look like? But first, let me tell you who the winners and losers of the future are. For blue-collar workers, the losers are repetitive workers. Workers like factory workers that do the same mechanical thing over and over again. Automobile workers, those jobs, sorry, are going to be eliminated. However, garbage men, sanitation men, construction workers, they will have jobs for the future. Because robots have the intelligence of a cockroach. They don't pick up garbage. They can't recognize a crime. They can't make a building. These are non-repetitive workers, blue-collar workers. They will have jobs. Now, among white-collar workers, the big losers are middlemen. So if you think that your future is to be an agent, a broker, think twice. When I booked my airplane ticket, did I go through a travel agent? No, I did it online. When you buy stocks now, how do you buy stocks? You go to a stockbroker? No, you just buy it online. So what do stockbrokers do today? If you were a stockbroker, how will you make money in the future? You will make money not by selling stocks. Stockbrokers will not make money by selling stocks. What will they sell? They will sell something that robots cannot provide. Intellectual capital. Human advice, analysis, creativity, experience. Robots don't have experience. Robots don't have analysis, creativity, intuition. That's what middlemen will have to do. So the losers are repetitive workers and middlemen agents. The winners are construction workers, where every job is different, garbage men, where every garbage is different, rock and roll artists, because that's intellectual capital, scientists. Tony Blair of England likes to say that England derives more revenue from rock and roll than the coal industry. I mean, think about that. The Rolling Stones generate more revenue for England than what a coal miner can generate. And so that's going to be the future. Intellectual capital. Not commodity capital, but intellectual capital. For example, this morning you had breakfast, right? Breakfast that the King of England could not have had 100 years ago. Think of what you had for breakfast today. The King of England couldn't have these delicacies from around the world. That's how cheap agriculture has become. But intellectual capital, movies, books, humor, imagination, science, analysis, They will be the currency of the future. But let me end on one note. And that is, when I was a child, I had a role model. My role model was Albert Einstein. And my favorite Einstein story is this. When Einstein was an old man, he was tired of giving the same talk over and over again. So one day his chauffeur came up to him, and the chauffeur said, "Professor, I'm really a part-time actor. I've heard your speech so many times, I've memorized it. So why don't we switch places? I will put on a mustache, I will put on a wig, I will be the great Einstein, and you can take a rest and be my chauffeur." Well, Einstein loved the joke, so they switched places. This went along famously because he was a part-time actor until one day, a mathematician in the back asked a very difficult question. And Einstein thought, oh, the game is up. But then the chauffeur said, that question is so elementary that even my chauffeur here can answer it for you. Thank you very much. You're a great audience. Thank you very much. From the audience, okay? A few questions? Yeah?
Where before leaving? So let's go. Question.
Well, I've tried my best to condense a number of the questions that came from students and the audience tonight. And so I picked out sort of the top 10 list. We'll try and go through as many of these as we can. From a student, the question was given, paraphrasing Arthur C. Clarke, that any science or technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. This kind of understanding and use will be available only to the fortunate few who can afford to acquire these advanced genetics and different technologies. So the question is, how will the great chasm between the haves and the have-nots be reconciled if there is both an economic and technological divide?
The question is, are we going to have a digital divide? We'll have the digital rich, they will have laptops, they will have PCs, and we will have the digital poor, and they're not going to have laptops and PCs. Well, no one talks like that anymore. Now, children, poor children are on the web. In fact, if you're a kid and you're not on the web, you don't exist. You don't exist. No one knows who you are. You've got to be on the web in order to establish your presence. And so the digital divide was not the problem. The problem is jobs. Jobs are changing. That is the real problem. Now, first of all, any technology when it's first introduced is for the rich. Hey, that's the way it goes. These technologies cost money. Someone has to pay for it. Usually the first people to buy it are the ones who pay for the expense of making these inventions. But the price goes down. We have Moore's Law. Computer power gets cheaper by half every 18 months. Every Christmas, your computers are roughly twice as powerful as they were the previous Christmas. So the problem is not access. Even biotech therapies. One day we'll have perhaps designer children. We already have isolated the smart mouse gene and the mighty mouse gene. The smart mouse gene makes mice have better memories. They learn faster, they learn quicker. The mighty mouse gene makes them bulk up and they become muscle bound. We now found a baby boy in Germany who has the mighty mouse gene. He's also bulked up, so we cannot call it the mighty mouse gene anymore. Now we call it the Schwarzenegger gene. But one day, they will become commercially available. And again, it'll be for rich people, but the costs will go down with time. So I'm not worried about access. What I am worried about is the job market. Now, people say there are no jobs today. Everyone says there are no jobs. There's no jobs. Wrong. There are plenty of jobs waiting for people to fill them. But they require a scientific background. They require a college education. And that's the irony. The irony is that there are plenty of jobs out there, but American workers are not educated enough to take those jobs. Sorry to say, but America has one of the worst educational systems known to science. Not Rollins College, of course. That's the exception here, right? But in general, we graduate people from high school right into the unemployment line. High school graduates today are perfectly equipped to live in the world of 1950. But we don't live in 1950 anymore. Factory jobs are disappearing, but intellectual jobs are flourishing. That is the problem. The problem is not the digital divide. The problem is scientific education. And that's where the Science Center here at Rollins College plays a key link in this whole chain. Right here on campus, new Science Center will make sure that we graduate people not into the unemployment lines, not graduate them into the world of 1950, but graduate them into the world of the 21st century.
Quick political science question. Star Trek or Star Wars?
That's a tough one. First of all, I grew up on Flash Gordon. That's one of the things that I loved when I was a kid. And another guy about my age also loved Flash Gordon by the name of George Lucas. He stole huge chunks of Flash Gordon to become Star Wars. City in the Sky, the Hawkmen, all directly taken from Flash Gordon, and it became Star Wars. So I love Star Wars for that. But hey, Star Trek makes you think. It makes you think about the future that could be, rather than simply cowboys and Indians in outer space. And as a physicist now, I can begin to rank these civilizations. For example, we think that a Type 1 civilization is about 100 years more advanced than us. That's the world of Flash Gordon, where we have a planetary civilization that can play with the weather, play with the oceans, play with the atmosphere. That's called Type 1 from a physicist's point of view. The world of Flash Gordon. Then there's Type 2, the power of a star. The power of the ability to manipulate the output of an entire star. That's Star Trek. A Federation of Planets is a typical Type 2 civilization where they've colonized a few neighboring planets, but that's about it. Now, what is Star Wars? Star Wars is Type 3. Type 3, galactic, roaming the galactic space lanes. And I gave this talk in London once to the planetarium. And that little boy comes up to me and yanks my pants, real pesky kid. And he says, "Professor, you're wrong. There's Type 4, okay?" So I looked down and I was thinking of saying to him, "Shut up, kid." But I didn't. And I said, "Look, kid, there are only planets, stars, galaxies. There's only Flash Gordon, Star Trek, and Star Wars. That's it." And he said, "No, you're wrong. There's Type 4, the continuum." Now, who can tell me here, who's a true Trekkie, what is the only Type 4 civilization on network television? The Cube. Now, if you did not understand what's just transpired, get with the program. Okay? It's Star Trek. Type 4 is the cube. That is the power of dark energy, which pervades the entire universe, causing the galaxies to expand away from each other. So yes, we think there's Type 1, Type 2, Type 3. Now on this scale, what are we? Are we Type 1 that control the oceans and atmosphere? Are we Type 2 that control the sun? Are we Type 3 that roam the galactic space lanes? What are we? We are Type 0. We get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal. But we see the beginnings of a Type 1. What is the internet? What is the internet? The beginning of a Type 1 telephone system. We are privileged to be alive to witness the birth of the first major Type 1 technology, the internet, a planetary telephone system. And what language will they speak in this type 1 civilization? Well, go to the internet. The 2 major languages on the internet are English and Mandarin, not French. Sorry about that. These are the languages of the future. And what is the Olympics? Soccer, type 1 sports. What is rock and roll? The beginning of a type 1 music, a youth culture. What is the European Union? The beginning of a type 1 economy. So everywhere I look, I see the beginnings of a type 1 civilization, and we're privileged to be alive to see it happen right before our eyes.
Someone in the audience actually is combining 2 questions, but familiar with your work in field theory. Is physics a finite science? And does technological advancement ever have a prospect of stopping its acceleration, slowing, and perhaps even ending?
Well, I like to look at it as a chess game. Let's say you're from Mars and you see a chess game. You've never seen chess before. So what do? You first look at how the pieces move. You have to know the rules of the game. But once you know the rules of the game, it doesn't mean you become a grandmaster. That's what we are today. We have now decoded the atom. We've now unraveled the DNA molecule. We've built the first computers. This means now that we have basically ended one stage in the development of science. We are learning the rules of nature. The rules of nature. Now I work in something called string theory. We think string theory is the final theory. The theory of everything. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by the fact that Einstein spent 30 years of his life chasing after a theory of everything. An equation 1 inch long that would allow us to, quote, read the mind of God. That would be the rules of the game. But it doesn't mean we're grandmasters. That's the next step. Once we have all the rules of the game, to become a grandmaster, and that never ends. But physics, some of us believe, will eventually end. The basics will be unraveled, we think, by string theory. String theory basically says that all the particles we see, neutrons and protons, are nothing but vibrations on a rubber band. A tiny rubber band that vibrates, each vibration is called a neutron, proton, electron, pi meson. That's why there's so many of them. They're just vibrations on a rubber band. So physics is nothing but the harmonies you can create on rubber bands. Chemistry is the melodies you can play on strings that interact. And then the universe is a symphony of strings. And the mind of God that Einstein spent 30 years of his life trying to decode, we now think we know what it is. The mind of God is cosmic music. Cosmic music resonating through 11-dimensional hyperspace. That's what I do for a living. That's my day job. Working in 11-dimensional hyperspace, working at the properties of vibrating strings, which we think is the mind of God. Music, a paradigm rich enough to explain all the phenomena we see around us. We think we have the theory, and we're now testing it with the Large Hadron Collider. We're now building machines to test this theory. The next machine beyond the Large Hadron Collider is the International Linear Collider to be built in Japan. The Japanese government is approving it even as we speak. They're doing it as a stimulus project to stimulate their economy. But hey, you can't get everything. So if they stimulate their economy by building another accelerator, maybe we can finally test string theory. So we think that string theory, though we can't prove it yet, is the final theory. But that doesn't mean physics ends. It means we have to become grand masters of chess.
Next question comes from a student moving back a little bit toward politics. You mentioned at noon today about how thriving countries and civilizations and thriving economies can collapse when they just divest themselves in science and technology. Do you believe that our nation and our economy is at risk of this as well?
The question is, Why aren't we speaking Chinese today? Why are we speaking English? Or for that matter, how come we're not speaking Arabic? If you were a Martian landing on the Earth 500 years ago, and you were to put money on which civilization will eventually dominate the world, Europe will be the last civilization to bet on. 500 years ago, they had the Inquisition. They burned Giordano Bruno alive in the streets of Rome for saying that there could be aliens in outer space. They put Galileo under house arrest. They burned witches alive. That's Europe. Meanwhile, the Chinese invented gunpowder. The Chinese invented the compass. They had the greatest fleet of ships in the history of the world that we would not have again for the next 400 years. So why aren't we speaking Chinese? And the Arabs, look at the Arab words in the English language. The stars have Arabic names. Algol, Altair. What is algebra? In fact, algorithm is an Arabic word. So is alcohol. That is also in Arabic. That's their revenge, right? So what happened? Why are we speaking English today and not Chinese? Well, the reason is 500 years ago, the Chinese did have one of the greatest fleets known to human civilization. They sent out looking for evidence of other civilizations. They brought back pictures of, they brought back giraffes and alligators paraded through the streets of the capital. There are woodcuts showing the animals being paraded before the emperor. And then I paraphrase. The emperor said, "Is that all? Is that all? Just crocodiles and hippopotamuses? Where are the empires that challenge China? We're number one." And what did they do to the boats? They burned the boats. And one of the greatest tragedies of science, the entire fleet was allowed to burn and fall apart. And what about the Muslim world? How come we're not speaking Arabic today? They had optics before the West. They got algebra. They named the stars, that we still use their names. What happened? 500 years ago, in fact, 1,000 years ago, they had a debate, which is even today resonating in the Arab world. The debate was, where does truth come from? Does truth come from nature or the Quran? Some people said we must understand nature, because that's how God expresses himself. But the fundamentalists said, no. You see, God is above nature. God can change nature. Nature is a restriction on God. Therefore, God is above nature. And if God can change nature, why bother to learn nature? God can change it anytime he feels like. And all the great academies of the Arab world were allowed to disintegrate. For 1,000 years, this has been resonating through the Muslim world. And now it's even worse. That same debate, the same arguments of 1,000 years ago are now being used in the Arab world today. And so why am I speaking English to you today? That's the importance of science education. Now, let me say one more thing. In the 1900s, all the great scientists were British. Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, Lord Kelvin. In the 1800s, all the great scientists were British. But in the 1900s, what happened? All the great scientists spoke German. We're talking about Schrödinger, Einstein, Heisenberg, Planck, Heizhauer, Werner von Braun, all German. What happened? England got lazy. England said, we're number one. And they let their industrial mind fade away. Science began to slowly go into the distance. The brightest minds went into massaging money rather than creating money. That is investment banking. The finest minds went into massaging other people's money, not creating utilities and chemical plants and electric plants. Professor Dyson at Princeton also told me the story that when he was a young boy growing up in Cambridge before the war, he saw this happen. He saw the greatest minds of Cambridge University turn away from science and go into investment banking. And then he said something which scared me. He says now, for the second time in his life, he's seen it again. Now at Princeton, The finest minds, young minds at Princeton aren't going into chemistry and science and math. They're going into investment banking. They want to massage other people's money rather than create money on their own. And so this is where Rollins College comes into play. Because this university here wants to make sure that we educate people that create value, not suck off other people's value, but create new value. New value. New value. That's what we have in science. That's what Rollins College is all about.
Next question comes from a very well-read 12-year-old named Joshua. In one of your previous lectures, you talked about as robots become intelligent, that when they get to the intelligence of about an ape, we should put in a chip to make sure that they don't rise up against us. But if they're really intelligent, what assurance do we have that they cannot overcome that chip?
Right now, our most advanced robots have the intelligence. I'll make this the last question, okay? Because we have to. Well, one more question after this. Then I got to sign books for you, okay? Yeah, our most advanced robots have the intelligence of a cockroach. You see that at Fukushima. Fukushima, the robots should be making repairs at Fukushima, right? Wrong. Bug-like robots go in, take pictures, and then leave. That's all robots do at Fukushima. So the Pentagon is now sponsoring a major competition, offering money to the company that can create a robot that can actually make useful repairs. Turn a screw, drive a hammer, turn the dial. Robots can't do any of those things. That's why the Pentagon is now offering a prize, a grand challenge, to anyone who can build a robot that'll do that. However, as I also pointed out, perhaps by mid-century, robots will be as smart as a dog or a cat. By the end of the century, perhaps as smart as a monkey. At that point, they could become dangerous. Because monkeys have a sense of self-awareness. They know they are monkeys. They know they're not human. And so they may have a different agenda than us. And so I suggest that we put a chip in their brain to shut them off if they have murderous thoughts. So the question is, what happens if the robots get so smart, they take the chip out? Sorry about that. Whoops. There's no guarantee that we can control robots as they become more intelligent, okay? Another possibility is to merge with them. Rather than fight them, merge with them. That is, we are already beginning to tinker with the human body. Cochlear implants. People who are once deaf can now hear again. Now we have retinal implants. Already the blind can see an image in about several hundred dots, not much more than that. But the blind can actually see colors now. And eventually we may have the ability to make repairs on the space station, repairs in mining operations that are superhuman. These are things that are being looked at right now, essentially to become Iron Man. And so another possibility is to merge with these technologies. My point of view is that it's too soon to decide, because we still have many, many decades before this happens. Now, some people say, well, what's to prevent some inventor in a basement to suddenly build a robot that is a Terminator and gets out of control tomorrow? What's to prevent that? And the answer is, that's not how science works. We have robots that are bug-like, that can barely look at an object. Like, you show them a glass, and they scan this object for hours. Hours, and then it says, cup. That's where we are today, okay? We got a long way to go before a robot suddenly comes out of the basement, rampaging and taking over the world. And that's not how science works. So we have plenty of time to debate the question, and I think by late this century, it is a question that we're going to have to ask ourselves. What happens when they become as smart as us? It's not going to happen tomorrow. Okay, one last question.
Last question, and that's because there were many forms of this submitted on different cards, but could you comment on the relationship between science and faith? Science
and faith. First of all, Galileo was asked this question before he was placed under house arrest by the Vatican. And Galileo said, the purpose of science is to determine how the heavens go. The purpose of faith is to determine how to go to heaven. So, that, in a nutshell, is the difference. Faith does not require proof. Science does. Science is based on testable, reproducible, falsifiable statements. For example, sometimes at cocktail parties, people come up to me and say, I believe in reincarnation. Maybe they're the reincarnation of Julius Caesar. Can I disprove that? And the answer is no. It's not a falsifiable statement. Because if somebody claims to be Julius Caesar, and I ask him some simple questions about the Roman Empire, and he gets them wrong, he can say, well, the history books are wrong. Because I am Julius Caesar. I should know the history books are wrong. It's not falsifiable. Or if somebody saw an angel, it's not a falsifiable statement. I cannot disprove it. Faith requires no proof. But on the question of God and faith, Einstein was asked this question, do you believe in God? And Einstein said, let's be careful. There really are two kinds of God. Two kinds of God. The first is the personal God, the God of prayer, the God of Isaac and Moses, the God that parts the waters, the God that smites the Philistines, the God that answers your prayers and kills your enemies. Einstein did not believe in a personal God. He believed in the God of Spinoza, the God of Leibniz, that is the God of order, beauty, harmony, simplicity, elegance, that the universe is so gorgeous, and it didn't have to be that way. We have laws which make possible consciousness. It didn't have to be that way. The universe could have been full of electrons and neutrinos. There are no stable forms of matter out of electrons and neutrinos. It's just a gas of subatomic particles. Those universes are very easy to create, but that's not the universe we live in. And so Einstein said that he believes not in the personal God, he believes in the God of order. And I think a lot of physicists would say, yes, the order is so beautiful, so great, it couldn't have been an accident. It's not random. It's not simply a question of an accident. There are well-defined laws that the universe seems to obey. Now also scientists, some people say that all scientists are atheists, right? No. The Pew Research Organization for about 80 years has been interviewing different groups of Americans for different questions. One of them was asked the scientists, do you believe in God? The question was asked 80 years ago, and the answer was 30% of scientists not only believe in God, they are churchgoers. They actually go to Sunday school. They go to Sunday class. They actually participate in the church. That was 80 years ago. Today, it's the same, 30%. It hasn't changed over an 80-year period. So, personally, I think there's also a possibility that there's a God gene. We might be genetically predisposed to believe in God, independent of whether God actually exists. You can actually strike the left temporal lobe of your brain, and you become super religious. I don't invite you to do that tonight. Do not get a hammer and hit yourself in the left temporal lobe. But many people who have injuries to the left temporal lobe become super religious. Okay? We think Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc may have had a blow to the left temporal lobe. Many prophets, once they get hit in the head, they really do think that there are spirits that they talk to, that they're personal emissaries of these spirits in the sky. These are people that are in our mental hospitals, but they may also have been the prophets of old. Who knows for sure? But maybe we're genetically predisposed to believe in religion. I don't know.